Monday, March 18th. Good afternoon. Take two. This is the Monday, March 18th, 2024 Council Committee meeting, the Orono Town Council. We have Councilor Powers, Councilor Baker, Councilor Larway, Councilor Demerit, Councilor Berthasol, Councilor Kenny, and on Zoom, we have Councilor Sarah Marks. So thank you all for being here today. And the first item of business, we haven't selected our committee chairs and members yet for this new municipal year, but Leo Kenny has agreed to chair the Finance and Operations Committee because to keep things as they were. So with that,
all right,
Councilor Kenny.
starting with the Finance and Operations Committee. We have a municipal bond presentation from Joe Cutera, SRVP, Senior VP, Moore and Cabot.
Yes, so you've talked recently about the need for bond issues on some of the projects that are upcoming with the facing the town council, and one is the 6 million you've pledged to the library project. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of have a review of bond issuance by municipalities. And Joe Cutera is Senior Vice President with Moores and Cabot and the town's bond advisor to many towns in Maine and New England. And he's done many issues. So he agreed to do a day in the life of the bond issue. And he also has a special connection to Orono. So he was very pleased to do it. Joe, are you there?
I am. Can I share screen?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, files. Here we go.
Russ, you're gonna first share what your special connection to Orono is. You get.
Hi, absolutely. Orono class of 67, University of Maine class of 71. My mother taught at Ace Adams for like 30 years. Grew up in Charles Street, and then when I was in high school, we moved over to Dryden Terrace, which, believe me, was grand because I could just walk. Friend of Bruce Farnsworth. So for the sophomore, junior, senior year of college, 4 nights a week, I was flipping pizzas at Pat's from 5 to midnight. So I kind of like the town and feel like I know Orono, and have always been very proud to be a alumnus of the school. Can you see my slide up here?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just
Awesome. Thank you.
Just gonna reduce the Zoom if I can.
Joe, they do all have copies that you sent of.
Okay, so we can sort of follow through. And what I would ask you to do is please interrupt me as we go through and ask me to embellish, to explain, or just to be quiet. And I can do all three. But here we are. I'm a super guy, been in the business since 1972. Worked in Boston for 12 years, New York City for 4, Portland for 12, been back in Boston since 96. I have about 78 municipal clients in Maine, and Maine is my only area of interest. On page 1, and what I'm going to ask you to do is keep this in your desk, because sometimes you might actually find you need it as a handy reference, and something, there won't be a test after this. We'll just have this discussion, but you might want to refer to these things from time to time. But here's an extract of Title 30A 5772 that basically gives you the rules to how you can borrow. You can borrow up to 30 years. Your first principal payment has to be made in 5. You can do an unlimited amount of bond anticipation notes. You can have level principal interest or level principal, your pleasure. And the bonds can be callable before they mature. And here's the official statement of a bond issue that I did for the town. The bond bank, and I'm not here to criticize or to compare. I'm here just to impart information. Uh,
Joe,
And so, I'm sorry, Sarah.
sorry, just on the first page, I did have one question and maybe I'm new to a lot of these terms. Can you tell where it says term securities may be issued for a period not to exceed 10 years? So that's different than the 30 years you're talking about, and I'm not sure I know what term securities includes. I would have thought stocks and bonds, but obviously not our kind of bonds, which we can do for 30. So could you fill me in on what that means?
Sure. And term securities is a bifurcated term that you either have a bullet maturity that you pay no principal until the 10th year, like Snyder, the Whiplash, and the mortgage is due, or you pay annual principal payments, which is more typical. That's called serial bonds. The term securities, typically, the bonds 1 to 10 years are very desirable by investors. The years 10 to 15 may or may not, but 15 to 20 is sort of a period where it's too long for the short investor and too short for the long. So many times we consolidate the 11th to 20th or the 16th to 20th into a term bond with the idea that every year a portion of that is paid from a mandatory redemption. As far as the bondholder is concerned, they own a 20-year bond, recognizing that every year a portion will be repaid to them by the paying agent. But the town has the benefit of having a 20-year level amortization for the project. So that's where the term securities. Now, term securities, true term securities are the bullet ones I talked about, which very rarely are issued in Maine. And the others are mandatory redemption term securities. But bond counsel has embraced that annual installments, as long as there's a mandatory redemption, can be called a term bond in the sense of selling the bonds to investors. There are no foolish questions, only foolish answers. Okay, the bond bank has a bunch of programs. The general resolution program, which is where the source of alternatives for our clients come. They either go to the bond bank or we do a public sale. The Clean Water and Drinking Water SRF would not really apply. The Orono VZ Water District would enjoy the benefit of the Clean Water SRF. And I guess your sewer department, if it's part of the public works, would enjoy drinking water. And these are heavily subsidized by the federal government and they're incredibly attractive in terms of their rate. However, they do require certain Davis-Bacon requirements and some administration fees. And these are all explained in great detail on the bond bank's website. And again, my desire here is just to expose you to that as an alternative that exists. The school revolving renovation program, of course, would be for RSU 26, not for yourself. But the typically it's to provide environmental remediation, asbestos removal, things like that. And each project typically can't be greater than $1 million. Now, the nice thing about it is it's 0% interest. And many times up to 50% of the borrowing is forgiven. So if you borrowed $1 million, you know, $500,000 is 0% for 10 years, which is kind of sweet. We have a differential between the bond bank and ourselves. The reason we're able to do our bonds is for a variety of reasons. Our bonds many times are bank qualified, which is a nuance in the business. Our bonds are scarce, that you know, if I got a strawberry shortcake, it'd be great, but the fifth strawberry shortcake, the marginal interest is waned a bit. And so if I own a portfolio of bonds and they're all Maine bond bank bonds, then I don't really have a diversified portfolio, even though their portfolio is diversified. But it follows the state in terms, it's a moral obligation of the state of Maine. But an investor many times would like to have no more than 20% of their holdings in the state and its agencies, including the bond bank, and the other no more than 10% of any one issuer. So that this helps, this type of scarcity allows us to provide a lower interest rate because the bond's more desirable, therefore they cost less. I mean, same thing happens with a used car. used car with mint condition is gonna trade a lot better than a used car with a dent in it. Most of our business is through sealed bid sales, and my challenge here from Cornell was just to expose you to some of those things that exist in the bond issuance process. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, is sort of give you a foundation for the various things that exist. A sealed bid sale, you create an official statement, you create a notice of sale, your municipal advisor sends it to a variety of people who have expressed an interest in being dealers. We use IPREO, which is over 900 broker dealers and invest in portfolios like State Farm, Travelers Insurance, to receive the notice of sale. And on the day of the sale, we open the bids at 11 o'clock, and the person with the lowest interest rate buys the bonds. And here are various services. And again, there's not going to be a test after, so I'm not going to go through it. And here's a discussion of negotiated or sealed bid, and you have those two options. Some of Orono's sales have been sealed bid. Some, because of the nature of the project, was a little bit more difficult to share with investors. So we negotiated to make sure that the bonds were placed in the right hands. And again, this is for your past reading, which is why we sent this up to you before, or future reading, but I'm not going to read it all to you. Although here's sort of a scale from the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. This sort of gives you where you might favor a competitive sale or a negotiated sale. For example, we did a Bar Harbor issue for $55 million negotiated because that was an extraordinary amount of bonds that the town had ever issued, and we wanted to make sure that they were going to be appropriately placed and take out the market risk in the pricing. On the other hand, a $10 million Bar Harbor issue we would do as a competitive bid sale. And so these are some of the aspects that give you the Cornell, I'm not going too fast, am I?
No?
Oh, okay, good. I don't want to go too.
Okay. Has Orono done both in the past? Has Orono done the the sealed bid and also bond bank, or am I misunderstanding what those issues are?
That's right. Like when we did
Yeah.
when we did the a refunding for Bangor for the Civic Center that we built, we refunded that on a negotiated basis because we needed to make sure that we're able to size the issue, sell it in the market within a 15-minute window, be able to find the appropriate reinvestment in state and local government securities. We were in charge of a lot of variables that in a sealed bid sale, you just aren't. On the other hand, you have a $10 million sealed bid sale. For example, these bonds here are $4.5 million. It's plain vanilla. It's just you're issuing bonds and you promise to pay for them. And well, it turns out this was negotiated. I'm sorry, because it was a refunding issue. I stand corrected. Here's a mystery, and this is something that only the real interested student cares about, but it's sort of interesting, is how do you get the yield at which you're going to buy my bonds? And so what we do is everybody's reading the same paper. And so first, the underwriter determines what the rating is, the amount of supply of that issuer, the amount of supply in the market. Is there a lot of demand or not much demand? And they establish yields at which they feel they can sell the bonds to investors. And a A-rated yield curve is going to be different than a double A-rated yield curve. And so they first established this. Second, the underwriter then determines how much they need for profit and expenses and sales commissions, because bonds are not bought, they're sold by brokers. And they'll want to work for, let's say, I don't know, 0.5% certainly less than real estate commission. And so they put 0.5%, and then the underwriter needs maybe another $2,000 for various clearing costs. And so it takes the yields and the amount of spread, and it says to the computer, okay, I've got to bid par or better. What is my profit plus my yield going to do to create an interest rate? And so that the computer tells us that in this market, these bonds can be sold successfully at a 2.56% total interest cost. That's how bonds are priced. Again, if you can understand this in a 3-minute explanation, you're a genius. And if I can explain it to you in 3 minutes, I'm a fool. So the whole idea is that it's meant to be a reference for you. And here's what NIC and TIC, net interest cost is the amount of interest divided by bond years. True interest cost takes into consideration the present value of money, so that if at the issue, we were able to give you, here's zero premium, we were able to give you a premium of $100,000 that would bring the interest rate down, which would bring the TIC down. $100,000 today is worth more than $100,000 in 10 and 20 years from now. So the present value of money, the higher the premium, the better the true interest cost will be in a bond issue. And it's just a matter of mathematics. I actually, I think I shared a beer with one of your council members about 10 years ago, discussing present value of money. And he was right, of course, because he's a math professor. But I wasn't that wrong. And then here's how we close the bonds. Now, what happens, this is important for the town, is the SEC controls broker dealers, but from the Securities Exchange Act of 1933, for new issue securities, specifically exempted municipals and government securities from being under their control. And that has the Tower Act in the 70s reinforced that, so that the SEC has no control over an entity and what they can do and how they do it. However, they have 100% control over securities fraud, and so that they make sure that the documents that we produce are accurate, that they're not omitting or embellishing on subjective items. They also control brokers and dealers. And so what they've said is, we can't tell municipalities to file their financial statements every year. However, if you're a broker dealer and you want to buy their bonds in a new issue, or if you're a broker dealer and you want to sell those bonds in the secondary market, you must have assurance that the issuer is going to provide financial records on a timely basis pursuant to a continuing disclosure agreement. And so they require that you provide your financials and operating data within 270 days following the end of the prior fiscal year. And it's called SEC 15C2-12 is the SEC rule. And it's a way of the SEC getting around telling you what you got to do. And not saying you have to do it. It's saying if you want market access and you want somebody to buy your bonds and trade your bonds, you got to do it. And here's Orono's EMMA files. Now, this is all posted, so any individual in the world can get it. All you have to do is go to msrb.org, go to EMMA data port, put in Orono Maine or the base CUSIP, and you can see all of the filings that were made as related to financial filings or filings as related to event filings. For example, if the bonds are callable, if the issuer is upgraded or downgraded by the rating agencies, certain things happen. These disclosures must be made pursuant to the continuing disclosure agreement, which I'm not going to get into. That, you know, if you want to have a separate conversation, we certainly can. It'll probably be the most boring conversation in your life, but it's there. But this sort of shows where Orono is. A couple of pages I didn't show, for example, if you got onto this, you could find out what Orono bonds have traded in the last 20 or 30 days and at what prices, what they were bought and sold at in the primary and secondary market. So there's a lot of information on this, Emma. Basically, it has your financial statements for every year. Okay, now,
Joe?
yes, talk to me.
Just Yeah, could you backtrack a minute, you mentioned it on this slide, you mentioned it briefly way back on slide 1. Can you just define for us callable and all of what that means?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And thank you. My jargon is my is my Achilles heel. A bond is issued, and municipal bonds are typically issued in serials of a maturity each year for 20 years. So a $1 million project would pay $50,000 a year, each year of principal, plus the interest on the then outstanding bonds that haven't matured until it matures. But the bonds are bought with the idea that there is a contract between you and the investor that they're gonna give you their money and you're gonna pay them timely. However, and it's different than the corporate market. The corporate market typically eschews call features, but the municipal bond market, bonds are typically callable within 10 years, no sooner, at 0% penalty at par, with the idea that if you're not calling your bonds, like if I did a 10-year issue, they're uncallable. If I did a 15-year issue, the last 5 years would be callable. So in the 10th year, if rates went down, or if you had a windfall of money, or something changed with the project, you could redeem those bonds and issue them with refunding bonds or cash. And this is how we're able to do refundings and advance refundings. In that call feature, if you don't have a call feature in your bonds and your investment grade quality as Orono is, the market's gonna sort of wonder why. Why didn't you take advantage of that? And now bond bank bonds are not callable. So you're in for 20 years, you're in there, and there you go. But these bonds that are issued in the public market are typically callable in 10 years with no penalty. So what's going to happen is you do a 20-year bond issue and the yield curve stays flat or stays the same. In 10 years, you're not going to be selling 20-year bonds, you're selling 10-year bonds. And so the 10-year yield curve is going to be less than the 20-year yield curve. And so just if things don't change dramatically, it's entirely possible you could save. I mean, same thing with a home mortgage. So that's call features, if that's helpful.
Thanks. So basically why that's important for us is to keep in mind that when things are callable, we can refinance if things are favorable to us or pay them off if we actually had the money to do that. And you said bank bonds, you said bank bonds are not callable. Does that include the main?
The main municipal bond
Municipal?
bank, part of their general resolution is you may not redeem the bonds before they mature.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, they have a pool and it's all created and somebody pulls out and the whole thing's gonna be very administratively difficult, is the politically correct way of saying it.
Thank you.
Sure. A couple of tax issues, and again, this is important, the bond counsel will lead you, is that it's called the pyramid rule. That the IRS said that if you didn't indicate when you built the pyramids that you wanted to ultimately refinance your monies with tax and bonds, then you have to declare that before you spend the money in the first place. And so they're having a situation here where if in fact you want to issue monies for a project, it's important to declare official intent. Now, bond counsel typically does this in your bond order, or if the bond is authorized by the voters, the ballot becomes a declaration of official intent with the expectation you borrow from the general fund and you want to reimburse yourself. Now, a couple of things. I did an Ellsworth issue where they disbanded the RSU. The city was very intent on doing some immediate improvements to the then reoccupied Ellsworth School Department, and they made all kinds of improvements. And then 6 months later, we did a bond issue and they wanted to refinance. Well, they didn't declare official intent. And so we had to refinance those monies on a taxable basis. So it's not, you can't refinance them. And we also did a separate series of tax exempt that were properly. So this is something that's important for you to know, not really to worry about. If somebody says something about it, that's where it is. But bond counsel is going to make sure you're all set here. History of banking. I hate to tell you, but I was in the middle of my career when the Tax Reform Act of '86 came. And part of that was that the IRS felt that if you're borrowing money, you can't use those monies to buy tax-exempt securities because it's a double dip. You get the write-off on the interest and you get a write-off on. So broker dealers, all of their money is leveraged. It's all borrowed in banks. And so they said that issuers may not be able to enjoy the tax exemption of municipal debt if they borrow money. Boom. However, then the banks said, hey, what about our small issuers? And this is why it's called the small issuer exemption. That it was deemed then $10 million that, if our local, I don't know, Troy, Maine wants to do $300,000 for a fire truck. What's the deal here? Because the local bank wants to do the finance. So they said, okay, anything less than $10 million of new tax exempt money, just tax exempt, each calendar year, doesn't matter when your fiscal year is, including capital leases. So if you have a school, which school's not within your budget, but if you did, you'd have to worry about school bus leases but photocopy leases. All of these obligations count and make the difference between your issue being bank qualified or not, which means that a bank can take 80% of the tax exemption as tax exempt income on their tax bill. The aspect of this is if there's something you happen to get, you're not supposed to chase for it, but it's something nice. The nice thing about a bank qualified bond is whether you're a bank or not and you buy it and you sell it on the secondary market and a bank then buys it, it keeps its bank qualified status. So it broadens the bid on the original issue and it broadens the secondary market. So it's worth knowing. Okay, if you can stand another story. 1982, let's say, the state of Alabama issued $100 million in municipal bonds. They put it into treasuries. They issued the bonds at 3%. They put the treasuries at 5%. They took a 200 basis point arbitrage, which is called inefficiencies in two different markets, and built roads. And the IRS said, you can't do it. It said, where does it say we can't? Now, to understand the tax code, it's not permissive, it's restrictive. To understand the tax code, you have to understand that the IRS does not want the issuance of any tax-exempt securities, period. And now you understand the code. So there was no restriction about that arbitrage. And so they created a rebate situation, arbitrage and rebate, and then also a replacement proceeds. Very complicated. This is where we have bond counsel really earn their money to make sure that if you have a project, to the extent that it follows any of these exceptions, then you do not have to worry about an arbitrage calculation. Now, the irony is over the last 5 years, there's no way you made money. If you borrow, even if you're borrowing 1.5%, you're still only earning 0.4% in money market. So that it became somewhat of a not event, but you sort of take a risk if things were normal and you got 4.5% for the money market and your bond issue was at 3%, that 150 basis point arbitrage would arguably have to be sent back to the IRS if you didn't satisfy these exceptions. Clear as mud, right? Okay, now I'll talk about something interesting, the rating process. No questions so far? Okay. Moody's and Standard & Poor's have the same basic fundamental 4 items: economy, finances, debt, and management. And they have different weightings in terms of how they do this. Economy is tough. The economy in Orono enjoys the presence of the University of Maine from the point of view of the multiplier effect. but it also is subject to enrollment trends and other aspects. And so it's sort of pro and con sometimes. If you're in Brewer and Eastern Fine Paper decides to close, you've lost a major taxpayer. That's kind of detrimental. On the other hand, if you're Lewiston, pardon me, if you're Auburn and who makes the sanitary napkins? I forgot. Decides to do $100 million investment, chances are, first, that's more tax base, and chances are they might stick around for a while. So that these are things that they look at: finances, fund balance, amount of reserves. They typically want to have 2 months of fund balance, and it's not called surplus, and it's not called extra money. If you are a business person, and many of you are, you need to have enough money so that all your bills came in the first day of the month and none of your revenue came in until the last day of the month. You have sufficient liquidity so you can meet your obligations in a timely manner. So you typically want to have at least a month's cash flow. And for municipalities, they want to have 2 months. And I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm just giving you the criteria. Debt, now we'll talk about debt in Orono in a bit. And debt per capita is very difficult as opposed to debt as a percentage of equalized state valuation, because university is 50% of your value, but it's not counted. And we'll talk about that. Management, here's the deal. You really need an investment policy, a fund balance policy, a management policy, and not just to have the policies, but to have certain criteria in terms of how to measure them, and certain criteria in terms of how to formalize them or institutionalize them. If you have a policy and you don't follow it, don't get a policy. If you have a policy and follow it, document it. Document that you did this. So in your next rating call, you can say every quarter we provide the finance committee with a list of our investments, and here's a copy. Or we find inform, and once a year we have so-and-so come in. But identify how that's happened, and that gives you credit for the management. Otherwise, as far as the rating agency is concerned, it's undocumented hearsay. And legal security is basically municipal water utilities, except for Portland Water, are regulated by the Maine PUC. Sewer districts are not. So if you have Auburn Water and Auburn Sewer, theoretically Auburn Sewer, same facility, same trucks, all this stuff, and many of the same personnel, is a higher quality credit because it doesn't have PUC interference as part of a legal security. LD1, which is a pain in the neck for us all, and nobody's following it, but it's still law, it's still there. But the ability to manage within LD1 rather than have it manage you is an indication of the flexibility that you have regarding legal security. Here are the various ratings: triple, double A, triple B, and you got Moody's over here. And here's what they mean. I had a council member from Biddeford say one day, "You keep talking about the ratings. What does it mean to me? Why do I care? And you say it's going to save us money. How?" Well, you look at these various tranches. I believe Orono's a AA3, AA minus. You have investment grade is anything Baa3 or BBB minus or better, but it's considered lower medium grade investment grade. Then you have upper medium grade, which is the A ranges, high grade AA, and that's where trust departments and fiduciary accounts start to have interest, and then prime AAA. There are only 2 communities in Maine that are AAA by Moody's and Standard & Poor's, that's being Falmouth and South Portland. And I'll show you some others that are AAA by S&P. But this sort of tells you where the rating process is. Now, if you were to achieve an upgrade from a AA3 to a AA2, chances are it would save you 3 to 5 basis points in interest, in lower interest cost. If you went from an A1 to a AA3, because you're in a different range, you're upper medium grade to a high grade, it might save you as much as 20, 25 basis points, because a whole different audience buying these. But this helps quantify, which the rule is 10 basis points for $10 million for 20 years is 100 grand. So if we can save you 10 basis points, if your municipal advisor can save you 10 basis points on a $10 million issue, you're saving 100 grand.
Joe, can you go back to that one for a minute?
Sure. This one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had two questions there. I think I'm clear on the basis points, but I just wanted to be sure that, I don't know if everyone is, or if I'm off potentially. My understanding is that basis points are
Sure.
basically the interest rate times another number, right? I don't know if it's times
Well-
100 or times 1,000, so you're not dealing with tiny point O's. Is that correct?
well, and actually, thank you for taking me to task about zipping through industry language without a dictionary. A basis point is 1/10 of 1%. So
Thanks.
10% is 10.0. 10.01, 01 is 1 basis point. So the difference between a 2.35% loan and a 2.45% loan is 10 basis points.
Thank you.
And
And-
again, Sarah, thank you.
I had one more question on that page, if you don't mind, just looking at the grade, the high grade, upper medium grade and lower medium grade. So right now, Orono's at the bottom of the high grade, and it looks like you were giving us some examples about what might happen if we moved up a grade. Also, if we were to move down a grade on our rating, am I understanding that there's a little bit of a bigger drop that happens, like instead of going up or down 3.3 or 5
Yeah.
BPS, we all of a sudden go up and down 5 or 10 BPS? And it also looks like there's a sort of a significant drop from the base of 10 or 15 to the base of 25 to 40, which made me feel like there's probably some real incentive to be sure that we don't drop down a level. Is that correct? Or is that drop not very
that's-
significant?
That's incredible observation. I mean, if you have 790 for a FICO score out of a possible 840, then everybody loves you. If all of a sudden you go from a 790 down to a 620, you're going to find out that all of a sudden the bank is now providing a different interest rate schedule to you because you're higher risk. Okay, the rating process, you have Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch and Cole. I really don't believe in Fitch and Cole. Moody's is the premier rating for municipalities. Standard & Poor's is a premier rating for corporates, but we typically get a Moody's and a Standard & Poor's rating on all of our issues. And what happens is the trend towards single opinions reduces accountability. In the old days, when I lived in Orono and Ed Libby was a manager of Merrill Trust, I'd go to Bangor and talk to the trust officer, and that's where my investments were. But I was in college, so I had none, but that didn't matter. Having said that, now the portfolio, first it was moved to Providence, and now it's probably moved to like Charlottesville, North Carolina. The portfolio manager has no idea who an Orono Maine is, as opposed to a trust officer sitting in Bangor would. And so that they look for the double ratings and read with great interest both the analyses, so they're able to develop some type of understanding of what is otherwise a foreign credit. So that's the way it is. Here's the methodology. Here's their ranking, what percent they put in each. So you put this on the 3 or 4 pages prior, and it'll sort of tell you what's the most important thing. Again, the economy is something you really can't do much about. The management, financial measurements and debt you really can do about. And here's Orono. I thought you might find this of interest. Let me just move this over here. Come on. Move over there. Good. These are, and it says 2008, but these have not changed in terms of what the various indices that the rating agencies look at. And this is not my analysis of Orono. This is census data compared to Standard & Poor's criteria of what is low, medium, and high. And your household per capita effective buying income is adequate. It does not surprise me. I mean, again, a student's going to live in a level of sustained poverty, but not be at that level forever. College professors may earn more than another profession or less. I don't know. But that's where Orono is. You're sort of in the mid-tier of adequate. Market value per capita, you're very strong. And this is relates to the housing market in Orono and also the apartments. Taxpayers, you're moderately concentrated in that it's diluted because you don't have an offset to Erie and Maine. If we, well, first, if we included them, they would be like 50% of your tax base. But it also sort of diminishes the other types of taxpayers that may offset that amount. Fund balance, 17.1%. That's above the 16.6% that they really love. They love you. Debt service of percent of expenditures, 8 to 12% is generally the range. Less than 8, they wonder if you're managing your infrastructure or letting it go afoul. 12%, they wonder if you're putting too much burden on your taxpayers, but like Auburn's 14%, but 80% of the debt's due within 5 years. So they have a aggressive repayment and show the willingness and ability to meet that. So those are explainable. What also exists is because you don't have the school district as part of your general fund budget, then that reduces the debt service and expenditures that aren't counted. So you put in the school here, and you might be closer to 10%. Debt per capita, I put in 1,573 census data, but then I add in the debt of the RSU consolidated with the town, and it's about $2,500 in debt per capita. And again, debt is from the market value, 2.8%, anything, basically 5,000, 3,000 to $5,000 of debt per capita for an Orono Maine is considered moderate. It's considered good. You're well below that. But overall debt as a percent of market value, it bumped because the school district has done some bumps here. But the town, yeah.
Joe, back on that on 23. This
Yeah.
slide was really helpful. Thank you so much for it. The whole thing's helpful, but thank you really, especially this slide. One question I have, and it may not be part of today's discussion, but I guess I just wanted to ask in case it's something you already know or something you could let us know. We've been looking at, future potential capital projects, which might entail us taking out bonds up to about 15 million if we did them all. Is it a fairly simple calculation for you or for, I don't know if it's our town staff or you that would do it, to tell us if we did the entire 15 million, where that would put us on this debt service as percent of expenditures and also the overall net debt per capita? Is that something that's fairly simple to calculate so that we would know as we're looking ahead to how much bonds we want to be taking out, what that will do to our rating if we take out that entire 15 million?
Yeah, it's moderately easy, moderately difficult. I've done a situation with Bar Harbor where we just did $55 million worth of water bonds and some other improvements, and now we have a $55 million school on top of that. And we leveraged it, taking their existing debt and adding different structures and amortize them different ways to alleviate the debt burden. We did a situation with Scarborough where they did a $40 million new school project, and their debt service payments, the way we structured it, was a 0% increase for 5 years. And then when it started to theoretically increase, enough prior debt had matured that it continued to have not a disastrous effect. And this is something that can be done. What you do is you time your projects when you want them. Of course, the IRS, the arbitrage and all that, you can't do a 4-year project bonded today. But you can sort of break those up and look at your maturity schedules and try to figure out, City of Portland's rule is they're not going to issue any more CIP debt than is maturing that year. So if they have $20 million of the maturing CIP debt from prior issues, they'll issue 20 million. So it's sort of budget neutral. So there are ways, Sarah, yes, there are ways of addressing this. It requires sitting down and talking and some analysis. But yeah, it's doable. As a matter of fact, you're supposed to do that. That's
Sarah,
yes, sir.
Sarah, maybe listening in, can you explain the $15 million figure you used and why you're using that figure?
But Sarah, you're on mute.
Dan, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but that's what I thought was presented to us by staff on the page that Sophie gave us about future capital projects, that if we did all of them, I thought that totaled 15 million. Cornell, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
wasn't remembering it and that others, I prefaced it in the idea that the public listening in needed the information, but I did as well. So thank
Yeah.
you.
And
Yeah.
that includes some sort of long-term strategic priorities that we've talked about a number of times, including the Route 2 corridor redevelopment and needed renovations to public safety, among other projects.
And it looks to me, according to the sheet that I have here, that you're gonna do anywhere from 3 to 4 million a year each year, and maybe the next 5 years. So that's how you get to your 15 million at the end, as opposed to one big $15 million hit today.
And Joe, in terms of and thank you, Sarah, for the questions and the clarification. Joe, in terms of the RSU indebtedness, and maybe we'll get to this later, and if so, I can wait, but does our rating include the same taxpayers pay the same bills in terms of the RSU and the town? So does our rating factor how much indebtedness is tied to the RSU?
Really, the rating agencies would say no. It's a coterminous obligation, and Old Orchard Beach and Orono are unique in that the RSU only has one member municipality. So you'd think it would be analogous, but not necessarily. RSU 21, for example, is Kennebunkport, and Arundel. And if you look at the slide right here, Kennebunk is AA1 AAA, Kennebunkport's AA1 AAA, and RSU 21 is AA3 AA. The good news, bad news is municipalities, RSUs the municipality is required to make a 1/12 contribution come hell or high water every month, so you have a known revenue stream. However, and the Department of Education resists having excess fund balance. They have what they call the 3% rule, then it's the 9% rule. Who knows what's going to be next? And so were they to have some type of extraordinary event, then they're going to have a different issue than if the town of Orono had an extraordinary event and you got to tap into your 16% fund balance. So there are some, because of the restrictions of RSUs, there is a causal relationship, but it's not a direct relationship. Certainly the demographic profile of the town, the economics of the town is going to have an impact that if you're, I don't want to pick out a town, but if you're a very small community that has very difficult time balancing their budget every year, then the municipality, the school is going to be impacted also. But there's a relationship, but it's not a direct relationship.
So can I just ask Joe, is that just because we're this enigma of a one town RSU? Because there is absolutely a direct relationship, obviously, between our school funding and our town. There wasn't when we had VZ and Glenburn in there, but that seems like a kind of a dangerous rule in my view, that there is not this direct relationship, because it is, at Dan's point, it's the same tax base that's paying the bill 100%.
It's interesting. Diversification can be good and evil. The way I understand it is the former RSU was Glenburn, VZ, and Orono. Back when I was in school, it was a school union between Old Town and Orono. And anyway, so the pool is only as good as the weakest member of the pool. And so by having Orono shed itself of other issuers that may not have the same credit quality characteristics might actually enhance the school. Or not. But there's a big difference between a AA3, AA, and a AA1, AAA with RSU 21 and Kennebunkport, and Rundle's not rated. So you can sort of see that and draw draw a significance there. Now RSU 26 is AA3, A+, and Orono is AA3, AA minus. So
So Leo, or Joe, is it fair to say then that, I mean, these ratings you're telling us about are about how the folks who are going to be, issuing our bonds, selling our bonds, buying our bonds are going to be looking at it. Leo, it's not how our taxpayers are looking at it, which is what you're talking about, where it equally affects our taxpayers. But Joe is telling us that the bond agencies do look at us somewhat separately between the town and the school. Is that correct?
two absolutely separate. It's as if you had just the Orono Water District, not Orono VZ, the same users as the taxpayers, totally separate. City of
So-
Portland is AA1 AAA, Portland Water is AA3 AA.
I see the advantage from the rating, and that's obviously great for us, but I think the way we look at management, I think we should, like our overall debt per capita, all of these numbers feel like we should be looking at the whole picture like you've done here, and you've added on. So we're at overall debt per capita is 1573, 2578 with the RSU. From our perspective on where we want to be, I think we should be looking at with RSU included, because that is our overall
Sure.
picture.
And if you're the town of Cumberland, you'd worry about the tremendous amount of debt Cumberland County has. Penobscot County fortunately has very little if no debt. But yeah, the overall macro picture of what which your taxpayers. I mean, I don't care if my tax bill says this is for the town, this is for the school, this is for the county. I look at the fourth line and say, you owe. That's how I can.
Yeah, right.
Joe,
Okay,
can you go back to page 23 one more time?
Yeah,
I'm glad you like my 23.
I do. I have so many interesting questions on this one. You mentioned something about how we might choose to, or the schedule you've seen from the town of Orono says we would be looking at bonding out 3 to 4 million a year for a number of years, which would eventually add up to the 15 million. Are there advantages and disadvantages to doing bonds like only 3 to 4 a year as opposed to bundling the entire 15 million together? And will we talk about the advantages and disadvantages to that at some point in the presentation?
Well, there are two, and yes, we will talk about that in a minute, and I have some data on that. The I anticipated your questions. This is what happens when I interrupt myself, is I forget my train of thought, but if you issued, well, first, the tax code requires you spend the money within 24 months. So it sort of virtually harnesses you a bit, or pay the arbitrage if you wish. You have one cost of issuance, one rating, one thing. However, the only way to really break even in the stock market is called dollar cost averaging. You buy 100 shares every month, and 1 month you're going to have the low, 1 month you're going to have the high, the other, and after a while you're going to have the average of the price if you participate with that discipline. So by tranching your issues, you're going to get a higher rate in one, lower rate in the other, middle in the other, and so it's a hedge. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, I'm doing an analysis for another client right now where they could issue 20-year bonds at a 2.45%, and the CPI is 3.2%. Well, why wouldn't they issue the bonds? Because it's negative. I mean, they're better off borrowing the money if it's lower than CPI and just maintaining. I mean, I don't want to get into a big thing. I haven't finished my thesis yet. But anyway, you might get the point there.
So really, unless the rates were incredibly low, it probably makes more sense to spread them out. That makes sense.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
And it also doesn't make sense to pay interest on the project until it's placed in service. And so you have all this extra interest you've been paying with no benefit.
Thank you.
Sure. Here are the different ratings. Moody's obviously is a little bit more conservative in their choice of sector of ratings. Standard & Poor's tends to be a little bit more objective, and then I put the two together to sort of show where they are versus their ranges. And I update this every time there's a rating change. The last time I did it, I think, was back in December. Let's talk about Orono for a minute. Now, this is, if you disagree with this, please send me your edits, because this is Joe Cutara writing about Orono, Maine, the best I know it. With pictures. And this sort of talks about it. Here's, if you liked page 23, you might like this one also. And I would provide this page to every realtor in the area, because it gives good demographic information. It's fairly current, that you're growing a bit. Obviously, you have a younger population. Of which most of it is going to be ages 20 to 65. Median household income actually is fairly strong for a college town. The poverty level is also skewed by the fact that that students live a level of sustained poverty, and it skews the statistics. I would rather not give explanations. I'd rather just have good data, but what are you going to do? And the median value of a home is pretty good, but only 50% owner occupied, which again is not that surprising. I mean, I lived in Dryden Terrace when I was in high school, but I moved over to 7.5 Mill Street and then 30 Main Street when I was in college. I rented. Okay, employment is always outpaced the county and the state. And here is something I thought you might find of interest. This is from the 2020 census, that people who live in Orono and work there, and where people in Orono go to work. And it's sort of an interesting dynamic. I came up with this with Freeport years ago when we found out that they had 8,000 transients who came into work every year, and they only had 6,000 residents. And unless they had child labor law problems, we were a destination source of jobs. And what this tries to show is that does exist. Let's see, employers. Tax collections are very strong. Anything in excess of 95% is deemed strong. I tell the rating agencies that if you have semi-annual tax collections, your fiscal year is the same as the state, and semi-annual collections, semi-annual, same as the state, then you don't need the liquidity of 25% of fund balance that you would have here, because you have two shots at the well in terms of receiving money, and the people do it in a very prompt manner. So that's very positive. The largest taxpayers, and of course, here's all of the real estate areas. And this is all information that I provided in my RSU 26 official statement, which we just came to market a couple months ago. And here's your debt profile. And what I typically do, and I don't have it here, is I amortize all your debt so you can show how much is maturing each year. I have it on a different file, but I can't figure out how to put it up on this thing. But you can see on a fully diluted basis, the RSU does add a bit of debt to your overall.
Joe, can you stop on that slide for a minute?
Sure.
This might be a question more for Cornell. So this was really helpful, the total debt. And I'm aware of the school bond, which went out between 2019 and 2020. But that was for 4.5 million. And this has gone up by over 8. Cornell, do you know, did we refinance loans at that point? Because I don't believe we took out any big ones on the town side, but something else is showing here, not just the school. Do we know what else is showing here?
Well, it looks like your debt's reducing from 2018 to 22, except for a small increase in 22.
I'm looking between 2019 and 2020, where
Yeah.
total debt is going up from 21,546 to 30,120.
Yeah,
And some of that is the school, but not all of it. So I'm curious what else is happened in that time period. If we don't know, maybe that's something we can look into, but
yeah, I don't know. I do know that that's the school and that's from your audit.
Yeah, the school goes from 2.9 to 12.4, Sarah,
where are you looking, Leo?
19 to 20.
Let's talk about the school in a second.
Ah, yes. Okay, I see. Thanks.
Okay, and here's your enrollment and EPS and the non-resident students. Now, this is good and bad. If you're in Southern Maine, it's bad because the state will give you the average cost of a student, which is typically about $4,000 per student less than it costs Portland or South Portland. And it might be $2,000 a year more than it costs Presque Isle or Calais. And I don't know where you are in that. The good thing about having a high level of non-resident students is that at some point you could just turn off the faucet and not have them, if, let's say you had a major boom, you could replace these with attending schools without any capital expenditure, although you probably wouldn't do that. Okay, here's the school project. And this is what we've done. Oh, I have typo there, I'm sorry. This is very complex. We issued 12 million bonds in 2019. We're gonna issue 4,350,000 in bonds and no, these are bands. But I'm sorry, they're 5-year bonds because you can't issue a band longer than 3 years, and the time starts on day one when you start doing the financing. So we're able to take advantage of the band section of statute. But you can do a bond issue for a school whereby the first principal payment can be delayed X amount of years, which we've done. So although it was very short, in 2023, we did a $4 million bond issue. So right now, 12 plus 4 is 16. Now, what we're going to do in 2 years is these bonds will mature in 2025. We'll be able to do real long-term financing with these guys because they have outstanding. We're able to meet the school building requirements, the financing requirements, and our target was to stay within about $1,170,000. And as you can see, we're pretty much staying pretty close to on target. I mean, if I get to $32,000 with $1,200,000, I think that's de minimis. But anyway, this explains the whole structure. And this is probably one of the most creative financings that I put together. But it takes advantage of, as I set up here, there's treasury regulations, the IRS, the policy objectives of the school, title section 20A of the main statute for school building. I had about 5 different variables here fighting each other, and only by sheer determination were we able to find something that worked. But ultimately, what will happen is this amount won't increase because 12,145,000 plus 4,350,000 has been issued, and this is going to be a refunding issue, not new money. And
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. That looked like very creative work that helped our town.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, it all started with the Glenboro Q-SCAB thing that I believe the superintendent or the school committee promised you that they won't be making substantial payments until this thing's paid off, but that violated the school rules. So, questions? Good. It's 6:03, so I've talked just for an hour and 3 minutes. I gave myself an hour. I'm sorry. Anything else?
Joe, question, what's the general timeline, between, preliminary discussions to issuance for, like a brokerage firm such as yours, or if we were to do it through the, bond bank?
I'll show you. Bear with me. The answer is 6 weeks, but
For both brokerage and the bond bank?
well, no, the bond bank's different. They're gonna issue bonds every fall and spring. You stick to their timetable. They're gonna do a May and an October financing. They have the application. It's in the main townsman, their schedule. But I believe it's a little bit longer period of time. But it shouldn't be that complex. But in terms of where we are, all right, October 4th. Okay. We started working October 15th. We priced it 6 weeks later on November 22nd, and we closed, I don't know what, 2 or 3 weeks later on the issue. So, it's about six weeks from the day we start talking about it to the day we sell the bonds should be about 4 to 5 weeks. From the day we do the bonds to the closing should be 10 business days.
And is that, you gave some examples in some different towns you're working with. Is that rate still typically in the 2 or 2.5 or less than 2.5% for bonds, or is that old news?
Well, I'm gonna close this. Okay, hold on. So I can look at some files. I'm going to, let's see. The last issue we did was October of last year for Portland, and it was a 4.25. Auburn was 4.07. Scarborough was 3.5%. So I'm using 4% as a budgeting. For budgeting.
Better than 7, I guess.
Yeah, again, I can tell you rates are gonna go up and they're gonna go down. I just can't tell you when.
You see 4.5%.
Right, he's been using 4 as a budget, because
And this maybe is a dumb question. I still don't know this stuff very well at all, but so are you typically selling them or issuing them? Or are you typically going to a bond bank? Or I guess I didn't fully understand what dictates what you do.
All right, a public sale, you hire a municipal advisor to create the financing documents, the official statement, to distribute it to we having a fire drill, I guess.
He facilitates the sale.
What's that?
He helps facilitate the sale of bonds.
But when do you,
Yeah, well-
how it's done versus when do you do which? You never just go to a bond bank then and take the money from them and let them deal with it, or do you?
Those are the two options. So go through a brokerage firm such as his, or go through the bond bank application process.
And what's gonna happen is the bond bank will create their official statement that is on their website. You can look at one and it identifies all of the municipalities that are part of that pool. They hire, I think, Bank of America to be their underwriter. They have Hilltop Securities as a municipal advisor. So there are similarities between them and us. They don't sell the bonds. The Bank of America syndicate and the underwriting group sells the bonds to investors. In a public sale, we create an official statement that says Orono. We send it to prospective bidders or to an underwriting group to underwrite it. And they then sell the bonds to investors in the marketplace. The investors in the marketplace are the same investors that buy the bond bank bonds. These are just an alternative. So that's where it ends up ultimately. But we don't sell the bonds to the bond bank at all.
Is there a advantage percentage wise going one way or the other typically, or no? And to me, in my simple brain, it just seems like going to the bank is easy. And this sounds complicated, granted, it doesn't sound like something we have to concern ourselves with, but it's a process and it's what you do, obviously. Is the advantage, rates by
Right.
doing that?
The difference between 10 basis points for $100,000, for $15 million for 20 years is $150,000 in interest. We typically do our financings at anywhere from 20 to 40 to 60 basis points lower interest after cost of issuance than bond bank issues. I just provided this analysis to Saco the other day, and it was like 55 basis points lower. All right, do you want to save, what's 55 times, 150, so it's 150 times 5 in interest? Or do you want to make out an application? Or go to the bank? It's easier, but long-term, I mean, when we did our SU 21, we did 41 million bonds. And they saved $4.5 million in interest after cost of issuance, just as if they did their financing versus somebody else.
Leo,
Okay.
Leo,
Yes.
Leo. Yeah, thank you for your help for me on page 28, because that totally I had missed. I see the 9 million for the schools right there, so thank you. And if you look at page 3 of the presentation, this is where Joe gave us an example of a comparable between the Maine Municipal Bond Bank versus a private sale for Bath, which was a town that had the same rating that we have. So the same, A3 rating and he shows you there like how much was saved by doing the private route as opposed to the Maine Municipal Bond on a $10 million bond over 20 years. That saved Bath 700,000.
Yeah,
And then,
Bath is,
right?
Bath is a 265, the bond bank was a 330. So 30, it's more than 10 basis points.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Leo, that's sort of your question, right? Why would anybody do it? This is the why, because it might save us potentially a lot of money to do it that way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even understand these were different options when I came here. So now I'm a pro. Thank you.
You want to take the test?
I am not ready to take the test, but I do appreciate the presentation. It has helped for sure.
Again, 90% of what we've presented to you today, I don't expect you to really have absorbed. I want to let you know that it's there for your future reference. Read it in small pieces. But the information that you have there is not meant to be a sales tool. It's meant to be an information of issuing bonds, which is what Cornell had challenged me to provide to you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Cornell, for-
you.
I apologize for not coming up. I hate these Zoom things. I typically like to do person to person, but things get in the way.
I bet we'll see you again. I bet we'll see you in person sooner or later.
We'll see you another
Yeah.
time.
There you go. Talk to you.
It's your Orono alum.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.
I would note that the town has used the bond bank SRF program. We just did the Mahaney sewer project. In fact, we'll close on it this month. So we have used that, but for a bond issue like the
What did we
library.
pull out?
What did what?
How much did we bond?
800? I think it was around 800,000.
Does Joe have a contractual relationship with us anyway now, or would he, if we worked with him in the future?
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just, we've used them in the past, and really you'll save money if you go with a issue as opposed to bond banks. And might most likely use him for advising the town.
Yep, that's great.
All right. Next item is discuss the facilities planning that we tabled from March 11th, 2024 council meeting. I guess I was kind of pushing for this to be on next week, but I just a quick, I think, brief update. So we had a proposal for 26,000 on the table for next steps. And I can speak for myself that I had some concerns with the price and the scope of the document. And a lot of it was related to our previous quotes, our previous contracts that we've had. That I feel like a lot of that scope was initially included, that we didn't end up getting that. We changed contractors. It got confusing there a bit, but I had concerns with paying what I felt was paying again for what were pieces I thought should have been accounted for in the original document, so we've tabled it. Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but you.
Yeah, I think I wanted to, when we tabled something, I like the idea of us getting to it at least quickly for a conversation, refer it to a committee like we
Yeah.
did. And, we don't have to decide, anything tonight, but I do think, so that's why we're talking about it today, but at the same time, I do think it's, it feels to me like it's time for us to take a step back and consider the bigger picture, the global picture of what Orono needs to do with all the projects that are coming online, the recent, the various studies that we've had, and the things that we need to do. Library's gonna move forward, the things we need to do with public, we clearly have a need at the public safety building, but we just have, last summer, we were looking at, plans for how to address, you've seen it. I didn't print the Haley Ward assessment of our community facilities and what we do here. And the conversation about, things that are needed to be improved here at the town office. And I think it would behoove us to think, instead of doing things in a silo, take a step back, do the things that need to be done from a health safety perspective at the public safety. We don't want anybody working in unsafe conditions. If there are things that need to be addressed, I would like us to think about how we address them in this budget that we're getting ready to start right now, staff's getting ready to bring to us. And I'd like us to think longer term, like how do we get a group together that includes all, key stakeholders, to have a conversation about how we make it all work for Orono. I mean, and I think that needs to include the town. I think it needs to include the K through 12. I think it needs to include the university. In the conversation about how we make the facilities work. And I would like to see us be prepared to do something in the fall of 2025. If we're gonna maybe go to voters with a bond, if we're talking about the kind of money that it's gonna take to do everything and do it right. I'd like us to have that kind of conversation, because the thing that's been frustrating to me is I know we can't know everything all the time, but it just feels like there's so many moving parts that we haven't taken a step back. Any one piece is moving forward on its own is probably a mistake, I think.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments? Sarah, anything you want to add, or?
So what studies, I guess,
Yeah, let's
what
get
have we
to it.
done to date?
Right, yeah. Well, there's this one and this one. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly it. We keep talking about, we've done this study and this assessment. So what have we done to date? And so what do we know?
So, we had originally done hired firm A to do a study. And that was for, I think, 38,000. We changed
Study to do what?
to look at that facility.
Yep.
And they were gonna do structural, they were gonna do systems. They were going to also kind of propose or give us some ideas of how we could utilize the existing space. That, to me, has been the biggest thing that we haven't seen that was in the original proposal. We changed horses, went with in the middle of that contract, we paid 16 of the 38,000, whatever it was, changed contractors for 58,000, I think. And we just did receive that back in January. Again, it didn't kind of, one of the big things I think council is looking for is how can we potentially reconfigure and utilize the space we have? And that was the reason for changing with the vendor. I sent the meeting out from April 1st that I think is worth going and listening to. It actually was one that I missed. And I was on the council, but I did miss that one. That when we changed to the new vendor, And the idea was we were gonna get, I thought, some pricing, some concepts on how we would leverage that building. We really weren't talking about this building. Council was inquiring about, can we leverage this building too? But that, I don't know that that made it into the scope. So the document we did get back in January, the next steps from that was an $80,000 proposal, which is what we sort of balked at because we didn't know anything about this building. So we just said, can we do this? Can we incorporate this space? That came back, that's the $26,000 proposal we were just talking about that we tabled when it last on the 11th. And again, I felt a lot of what was it personally, this is just me speaking, but what was in there were part of the scope of that original contract. So paying almost as much as we were for the original contract, it didn't feel right to me. This all started, just to back way up, with a memo from the chiefs at the time about what they needed there. And for me personally, I kind of feel like it wouldn't be bad to go back to that memo and have a sit down and understand, hopefully I would like to worry less about code as far as electrical and all of that. I mean, sure, if there's any flagrant issues, but I think they really dug deep into stuff for what is our newest building. And we're not doing that in this building, which is much older. So I really want to know what's inhibiting our police and fire from doing policing and firefighting EMS. So I think, and I think there were some smaller things in there that were taken care of that, but personally, I would rather see some of those issues solved than doing, spending another $80,000 to hear about big picture. And it's worth reviewing all of the steps. And I didn't have them in order. I'm starting to get them in order, and I will share that with council just so we can kind of piece it all together on how it's happened. And that's why I thought another week of this, so we could kind of go over that.
So
Be helpful.
we already have gotten an assessment of that building, the, electric and that. So we've already
There's
paid for
been an
that.
assessment of the pinch points that exist in that building and the places where there isn't enough space and capacity for folks to be really operating at the level that would be ideal or aren't up to standard. But there hasn't been an assessment that gives us estimates and plans for potential renovation to sort of solve those challenges.
So it's more, these are the issues, but not.
These are the issues. And then I think the big picture question is, do we pay tens of thousands of dollars to get plans for a sort of building expansion solution to those challenges versus do we take a step back and make sure that there aren't other ways that we could creatively reconfigure what parts of town and what departments live where? So for example, would there be opportunities to renovate this building or other town buildings, which we have assessments of, in order to be shifting whose offices are where and making use of existing spaces? And I'll sort of speak for myself and a number of folks on council that I would like to see us solve the sort of space use challenges, and also feel like it's my due diligence to taxpayers to exhaust other potential renovation options before paying tens of thousands of dollars for a sort of building expansion plan. But this sort of $26,000 potential look at this building is something that we've tabled at this point. And so we're kind of, we're in a space of well, okay, how do we make the big picture plan for how to move forward? That's.
And obviously the caution, I think, is and because I gotta beat the drum that I beat it on everyone else here. I'm not looking to load up staff, but the original memo came from Chief Ewing and Chief Lowe. Chief Ewing's obviously no longer here. We have Chief Merrill. it was 3 years ago. I think just looking at that bulleted list and either crossing off or, you know, other major things, and again, more about function for doing the job that they do. Obviously, we're functioning. They're in there and it works. We saw pinch points, we saw crowded storage, we saw different, you know, we heard this HVAC stuff. But that turned into sort of, you know, the level one fix from the $80,000 proposal was all HVAC, plumbing, fire protection, electrical and structural, but there was nothing about usage of the space. That was level one, which to me, the more important piece in my mind is like the space usage. Again, and you know, part of it is, you know, we don't, if they're getting steamed out in the summer and freezing in the winter, we got to fix that too. But they looked at systems. They're looking at them in this whole big picture, which is good, but I do think there are hopefully some potential fixes we could do. And maybe it's just done within the process of maybe, you know, forget the memo. But they use that just for the process of their budget building this year to come back and say, here's what we really need. Or maybe there is nothing that's they really need and they just want to look at the big picture. I don't know. But I think I've always wanted to hear more from staff than I have from architects and engineers that came here and assessed the building. And we have that information, but I'd care more about like what's actually happening.
We can have them in next Monday, but they were part of the tour to show you
Yeah.
what the issues were.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the level one was to get you a cost estimate of what all the life safety codes, and there's a long list from a report, I think, brought to you in November.
Yep.
Of that building, and level two was the cost of doing that work, and at the same time, the space needs that perhaps needed an addition. And then the third level was kind of a 30,000 foot looking at possibly expanding to this building. That wasn't gonna be in detail. If you want in detail, that's the 26,000 that they quoted.
Leo,
Yeah,
thanks. And thanks, Cornell. Can someone remind me the level one cost on that? Was it
there is.
million? Was it 2? What was the level one cost?
1,000.
No, that
No.
was just to give
No.
us an estimate. of
You don't know what
the-
the estimate
Right.
for the cost is, because that's what
No.
they were gonna.
It was
But actually-
80,000. 1, 2, and 3.
But they did give us cost estimates for each level. Rob Yerxa came and stood up and told us like cost estimates for each level in general. I don't know. If we don't have that in writing, we should look it up. I like the idea of addressing whatever are the most urgent concerns in this year's budget, if we can do that. It depends on what the level of that cost is for a 1-year budget, Leo. But if the amounts were, I mean, the most urgent things, I really would like to show our respect for staff and what they need and get them addressed as soon as we can. I also like Dan's idea of stepping back and taking a look at all of our buildings and the plan for all our buildings. And just to clarify something Sonia said about potential reconfiguration of spaces and Jacob's question, the issue is that new construction cost is significantly higher than remodeling existing building cost. And Rob Yerxa explained that to us clearly at the last meeting when we asked that, yes, the new construction cost will be higher than if we can reconfigure spaces we already own. So just for me, for taxpayers and doing our due diligence, I need to see some plan that involves reconfiguring existing spaces, even if that only gets the police and fire half of the space that they would ideally like. I still need to know what we can do. What's the best we can do by reconfiguring spaces we have? That again is me speaking for myself. And then I feel like I have a comparison to look at. Our best reconfiguring of spaces would cost this much and would get us this much extra space. And then I can compare that to the new construction, which would get us all the space that people want. And also I thought on Jacob's question, I think the only thing that wasn't mentioned is that we also have assessments of all our other buildings in town. So obviously the library has recently done their assessment about how they're going to expand and what new spaces they need. we paid someone to do, I think it was, well, this company doesn't matter, but we paid a company to do an assessment of the Keith Anderson, the Birch Street School Senior Center, the fire department. So every other building, we do have an assessment of the condition of those buildings and investments that would need to be made in those buildings into the future. The building we don't have that for is the council chambers municipal building. Does that help also, Jacob, just to know that we have all the outlying buildings? We just don't have the municipal building.
So, and I'll send you links to the reports from we got in November, it was November 27th, and then the Haley Ward, it was the Haley Ward, Sarah, that did the community facility needs assessment, and that was involved community input and engagement around what potential reuses of those spaces could be. But you've got a lot of information, and I've been frustrated by not knowing how it all fits together, and kind of getting an assessment. The bond thing is really helpful, is kind of get a start on what that looks like. And then anyways, our budget process, I would think we want to challenge ourselves to think about, well, what can we afford in terms of borrowing, and use that as a tool. And I don't think, just to not suggest overextending anyone for now, I think we've got a budget to pass, we've got a search to finish. We've got to get organized as a council. And so I was thinking more like this summer, we bring people together and take, 10 months, 11 months, 12 months to put something together. And then our first municipal election in November of 2025 could be an opportunity. I know there are some members of the council who feel strongly that, or who have an interest in taking these kinds of things to the voters. And I think we do this right. There's enough, there's something in this thing for everybody to hate, but hopefully enough of things that people are gonna like, that, the vote, we get a stamp of approval from voters on it too, if that's the way the council wants to go in terms of sending it out to voters. But that's another policy discussion to be had.
So Dan, are you
So-
thinking about some kind of working group that would have staff members, counselors, and stakeholder community members all together for a year meeting to come up with plans? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, we have an ability to form special committees that the council can form and appoint counselors, citizens. I assume we'd be able to have staff liaisons with that to the extent that we needed them to have this conversation. And I like the idea because it's gonna it'll get buy-in from people who have, are stakeholders in the facilities perhaps, but also to feed us more information, but also to be advocates for it, to the extent that, when we come up with something, we've got people in the community that are known to our residents who could help talk about why there's a need for it.
So I don't think we're looking for them to come to us next Monday.
Well, I think you should hear what some of the pressing needs are instead of, because November of 25
Yeah, that's the one.
A long time from now.
is a
Yeah.
long time, and then, so you're looking at more than 2 years.
Yeah.
For them to wait, and I think you should hear what the pressing issues are.
Okay.
right now.
I mean, can we use that memo as the guide then, or?
It's 3 years old. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
think
Well,
it's-
I mean,
think-
right, but it is what started, so I'm thinking even in the meeting in April, Sophie said we took care of a door, there were little things on there too. But yeah, I guess whatever form it takes, it's fine.
So I know this is, we won't know costs, but are we prepared to do something if staff comes in and says, we need X, Y, Z? Or I'm being cognizant of being able to respond to their needs. So are we in a position to actually act on what some of these issues may be without cost? I know it's tough to tell, but I don't want to bring them in here just for.
Well, I think that we can go after costs without going to through an engineering firm, and depending on what the pressing needs are. Again, whether it's space, it's the cold office, the warm office, I mean, those are, we have HVAC people also, so, no, we don't personally, but I mean, but contractors do that every day, so.
I mean, we also, I mean, in the $80,000 proposal, we were going to get cost estimates for that building at a variety of levels. I'm not gonna pretend to understand what changes trigger what other necessary changes, as we discussed in several meetings back, talking about how you make enough changes, it means that you have to bring a bunch of other things up to code. I don't know how that works. I mean, that's part of why we wouldn't be hiring these people to be able to make these estimates. And if we are trying to get a sense for this building, if we want to incorporate that, we have a proposal that we tabled for this $26,000 estimate.
I believe that they've rescinded their proposal.
No, you gotta,
Oh.
We got a
Yeah.
revision to that.
Oh, it's a revised proposal? Okay,
Well,
Well,
no,
they just
no.
clarified, they
Okay.
would still do it
Yeah.
if the town wanted them to.
okay.
they don't want to negotiate with Leo.
they're not changing the
No
scope.
offense.
They feel that,
Not, no, nor would I.
Perfect.
Yeah.
they feel that the scope
Yeah.
of what they proposed was appropriate and
Great.
adequate, which
That's-
is what
that's
we
good.
had a concern about, and which is the reason that's tabled and why we're discussing it today.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
I think that, I think it's important to hear from staff, and I think it's fine to start from that original memo. There might be additional things. I absolutely agree that we cannot say we're gonna have a working group for a year and this is gonna be a decision in 2025 without also saying we're gonna address some immediate needs that need to be addressed. Staff has been waiting a long time for some immediate needs. So to me, those have to go hand in hand if we're going to do it. And Jacob, I don't know if we can do everything that staff say is an immediate need, but I would hope that we can do some of that. Because if not, you know, that's a problem. If they're urgent needs that are being asked to wait for another 15 months, they have been waiting a while. I think from my perspective, I would want us to do both. I'd want us to hear from staff. And at that point, we have what staff says are urgent, immediate things that maybe we can solve right now. Plus we have, as Rob points out, the $80,000 proposal and the $26,000 proposal that we could choose to pursue, but those are the options on the table at that point. And we could decide which of those to do and which to put on hold until the end of a year-long working group that Dan's proposing, I guess. Thank you, I'm done.
And may I jump in? I'll speak for myself. I think, for me, taking a tour of the public safety building, provided a lot of information and, convinced me of a lot of the needs to address issues in that space. So what I'd be most curious to hear from, if we're asking staff to take time out to come in and meet with us, would be of the sort of issues that are really high priority, what would be within our power to address this budget cycle so that we could prioritize those things. So I don't feel that I need a reiteration of like the big picture need. To me, that feels really clear. And the only question is like, what's the series of steps to be addressing that big picture? And can we prioritize in this budget cycle some of the things that are doable now? And I also, I know that Leo's not satisfied with the scope, but I personally think it would be worth moving ahead with the assessment of this building as proposed as a next step rather than waiting on that particular next step, which I think we will ultimately want.
In terms of the 26,000, and that's just, but is that just like what the space needs are within this building? That's what that is, right? It's not like I felt like, it's not like the
Yes.
detail that Matt.
Yeah,
gave
it's
us.
not, it's not systems or
Some of those
HVAC
things
or
are
any of that.
probably we can-
Yeah.
We can address if everything stays now. There's a potential that some of that can be addressed.
I think, I would like to, I mean, maybe a compromise is instead of the 26,000 now for the study, maybe that 26,000 becomes the, taking on maybe a couple things that
Yeah.
Matt's tour identified, if those are the right priority. I don't want to say in this session, I don't want to, it's too cavalier, but
And maybe we need to do a tour of this building.
Yes,
as
I
well.
would think, I think it would
Matt
be
has
very,
done that.
very wise for you, for everybody just to see how the space is used real quick. And then also there's a couple of issues down there that it would be nice if we could help.
Yeah, I'd love to understand
Yeah.
that too.
And some of them I think are doable for the near future. Just putting that out there, and then also we would be able to discuss if we decide to prioritize like space thing and have a space, have the engineering company come in and say, well, this is how the space is used, then at least we understand what they're talking about better.
Cornell, is that something where we should formalize a tour, or can we all just pop in like Matt did?
Well, I kind of told them,
Friday, you can do Friday.
You can do either,
Mhm.
if more than two of you, we need to post it as a meeting, but, we could schedule you. He's already done it.
Do you think we may be able to, on Wednesday, we may have some time between our executive sessions
Yeah.
that might allow for
Yeah.
that if we adjourn or recess the meeting for a little bit between, maybe that's a time that, see if we can do it then. If not, schedule some other time.
Yeah, we
That
have
feels
half
like-
an hour, Dan. We have half an hour. That time got shortened, but we have half an hour between 4:30 and 5.
There may be some time in the special council meeting between the two. Because we have to wait for someone for the second item.
So we might have 2 slots of time, but we definitely have a slot between 4:30 and 5 that's open.
Okay.
We can't walk through this building in half an hour then.
And it's huge.
But we could do 1 floor. I mean,
Mhm.
Could get both floors. I'll just say I'm in favor of holding off for at least another week or two on that proposal, and assuming that they will still honor it. If they don't, they don't, I guess, but I don't see that we should be forced
So
into doing it.
so just to hear it, I mean, hear from tour on Wednesday if we can, if there's time and mix our time together on Wednesday evening. And then next Monday, staff come in and talk to us about their most pressing needs in terms of what we could perhaps tackle. I mean, one budget's one budget, but within the context of the FY 25 budget, things that we could do, it'd be great to knock off some
Well,
things.
some of their needs may be items that are complex that requires
Yeah.
an engineer to give you an estimate.
Yes.
That we're not gonna be able to just say, oh, spend 50,000 on an HVAC system.
You gonna be okay with it if we have to get an engineer to? I'm teasing you, but yeah.
We
Yeah, we gotta, I mean, at some point, we gotta.
I mean, yeah,
take some votes.
I mean,
They don't need to be unanimous.
Yeah. I'd like everybody to be happy, but
Mhm.
yeah, we gotta make some decisions here that work for the staff too. Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you. Anything else on finance?
any public comment?
Yeah, yes, so it's been a bit kind of confusing just listening to kind of the discussions about these renovations, possible renovations. So it's really kind of seems like a lot of the same discussions happening over and over again. So it really feels like there needs to be a little bit of organization of what you really want, what you're being clear about what you're asking for, so that we can kind of move forward with some things, because we really owe it to the staff and our first responders. We really have to be there for them. So I think that's a priority, but I like the way that this is, that we're kind of, taking a step back and kind of organizing a little bit better to make a better decision. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
so, can I just make a comment? Can I?
This isn't a cross-examination,
Yeah,
Matthew.
No, I was just gonna say, I think, like, I would be just like, we're building this thing and we're gonna give them everything we can if I knew that I didn't have an obligation to the taxpayers, and I feel bad every time delaying this. And I hear what you're saying, Belinda, and I agree. And but I also have this competing obligation between people who voted that I talked to who struggle with money. And if it wasn't for that issue, I'd just be like, yeah, I want to give them everything they want because I want them to be happy. I want them to be out doing their job and come back to a beautiful space where they can like not be confronted with file cabinets in their face and have a meeting space where they're not just sitting there, you know, standing because there isn't enough room for them to actually sit down and meet together. Like, I don't like the way that. So,
Yep, and Paul Smith wrote to us
Yeah.
and he left before, we get to this conversation, but I appreciated hearing from him. That was
so
helpful.
thank you.
Next on the agenda, we had town council chair and town manager updates. Cornell, do you want to go first or?
Yeah, first, Mitch wanted to update you on the trash
Just
bin issue.
Just a quick, after the meeting on last Monday, there were some questions about trash bins, so I wanted to bring everybody up to speed and let everybody know kind of how we look at these things. So one code officer, and his job is to enforce all of our ordinances. So we're on we are complaint driven as to how we respond to those things. If he does see things and he's out and about, he deals with them. I can tell you that he did go out on Tuesday to look to see if there was anything outstanding that felt out of place. So there are a couple things that have come to light with the new trash system. One is we added an extra day. Okay, so that means from Tuesday, when Wednesday they could put it out Tuesday night till Saturday, there are trash cans out across the town. So with that, you see more. The second is we added trash cans, big trash cans, right? So that before somebody put their bag out, you never saw that. It disappeared and it was gone and you never saw a trash barrel at all. So it's very obvious that those are there. The ordinance basically states that you can put it out the night before, it has to be in by 11 o'clock the next day. Okay, so if it's Tuesday, that the trash is there, that it has to be put back on your property, okay, by 11 o'clock. So that means that if I have two bins and I don't want to drag them all the way up my driveway, but I pull them back out of the right of way on my property and they're still visible, it meets the ordinance. Okay, so that's another piece to this, because we do have folks that aren't moving them, very far. They get them out on the street and they move them back in. As far as dealing with landlords, because I know that came up and that's always a question. I can tell you that our landlords in the past 2-3 years, we've been meeting with them pretty regularly. Very good working relationship with our code officer and deal with things very, very quickly, especially now that we have the local agent in place. But when we get complaints about that, and often we do because they will have more trash cans than most, those are usually dealt with immediately. The other piece to this is that when we deal with them, it's usually a knock on the door and a reminder that you need to bring this in. It's not as if, so there's a process that we go through to try to educate people and remind them to bring it back in. We are not, I know that about 2 weeks ago, kind of leading up to this, we had some horrible wind, which caused trash bins everywhere. So that clearly didn't look good, but I don't know that there was a solution to that either. But I will tell you that all any individuals need to do is give us a call, the code office, call community development. Let us know if people are leaving their trash cans out or there's an appearance of that, and we will look into it. And that's how we've processed this. Like I said, I think one of the biggest things that we're recognizing is that we've got big trash cans now that weren't visible before. You just didn't know.
Bright blue lids.
Yes, didn't notice them before, so makes that more challenging.
And I'll also speak for myself. I really appreciate this update and all of the hard work of our code enforcement officer, among other folks. And I do remember as we were discussing the rollout of the way we're doing trash collection now, there was a concern that, folks who maybe didn't for whom it could be challenging to wheel those big bins, it might actually be easier for them to just leave them at the end of the driveway so that it wasn't a sort of physical hardship for them. And if there's ever that situation where like, I don't wanna make someone in their walker like wheel the bin in just because of if it's sort of an undue thing. So that's my perspective on that is I'd rather sort of yeah. If we need to adapt the ordinance in light of the fact that these bins are larger and not everyone can get them into the side of the road, I'm happy to think about that, but to me, it's not a burning priority at this time.
It's, I thought there was, maybe it's just for rentals where you're supposed to have your trash out of sight. Is that just rentals?
So if it's commercial and there's a site plan that they would talk about that, yes, usually those are part of a site plan that you would put your trash in a certain area. Usually their dumpsters is what you're talking about, but you can do that. Anything, we're only do residential.
Yeah.
So these are only residential
Right.
properties. So they would all fall within that. There isn't a,
And they
you have to shell it. That was not part of that. And those ordinances,
They just have to be on your property?
they have to be on your property.
I also recall, at one point, maybe this was just a temporary thing. Well, I know a number of people who told me that they're still unclear when their trash day actually is, with this new system. I know I had a confusion for a while. And I seem to recall that there was, maybe there's a problem with a truck or something, but there was actually some uncertainty about this. I wasn't sure if that has stabilized or whether I'm misremembering that there was an instability with that.
So I do know, and I am removed from the trash. It's not
Yeah,
what I do.
I know it's not your job.
I do know that, that early on, there were some issues and we've had issues with the truck breaking down or things like that where they'll be picked up the next day and things of that nature. That's pretty much stabilized as far as we have not had those issues and usually those are communicated out. Everything is on the website. There's also an app that, will text you to put your trash out. So if so I think most people have now are understanding
Yeah.
what the pieces are at play. But certainly if there's any confusion, they can call the numbers right on there and Mike or Megan will talk to them and sort out any challenges they might have with trash. And we still get those if something doesn't get picked up, those calls come in and we work with the vendor to make sure that happens.
Thanks.
Can
More
we
like
put,
me, I don't remember until my neighbors put it out. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's trash day.
can we put something, Dan, this to you?
Yeah.
In the Observer, updating, kind of reminding, this last week tried to do the neighborly thing because tenants just moved in next door. Their thing was open, overflowing. I grabbed a couple of their bags, put it in mine, closed the lid. They won't pick up if
Yep.
your lid is open.
So
Unless it's windy, maybe they.
yeah, we can do some education, like Facebook and those sorts of things. I think there's some stuff online that has that information, but I can work with Pete to push some stuff out and we can put reminders in.
Just reminders, yeah.
And we'll maybe make that a standing in the Observer.
Yeah.
Piece.
Even the one about pulling it in the night within 24 hours. It's just your property. And again, people are gonna leave them where they leave them, I guess, but.
Yeah.
It is more, I do feel like based on my walk every day, it is more the rentals that they're kind of down there. It's been full for 2 weeks. I don't know what they're doing, but another one down the street. So a reminder to all rentals or something too would probably be bad, but thanks for that update, Mitch.
If I'm picked up on if I'm picked up on a Wednesday, I can put it out Tuesday night and I have to have it in by Thursday morning at 11.
Yep.
Okay, so it's kind of a 36-hour window of.
Yep.
Yeah, now there's 3 days, so yeah, that makes a ton of sense that.
You just expanded that. And like I said, you've put pretty significant trash cans too
Yeah.
at the end of every driveway. So
Yeah.
you're gonna notice them and they're gonna be out all week because somewhere around the neighborhood, if you're moving around, you're gonna see them.
It is, it's kind of we are the land of trash cans these days and it's really not an attractive look, I don't think. but-
It's not just us though. That's how it is in other towns now too. And I have felt like the rollout of our new trash system went as smoothly as I could have possibly imagined. So hats off to everyone who was involved.
Yeah, this is nothing about the rollout and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just like the reality of where we're at.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I appreciate bringing this to us. I like the idea of, to the extent we can, when we get a a comment in a public comment in one of our business meetings. I like the idea of, at some point being able to have, and maybe we should consider, asking people for an email address or so we can respond to them. I don't like sitting and listening to people and not I know we can't respond in the moment because we need to take some time to do it, but I really appreciate hearing that we had this. It's now, we put it on tape, as they say in the NFL or in sports world, we put it on tape and share it with people. That's what they do. I get it on tape. And I know. And then we can. But I do like the idea of having this kind of response when we hear about things in public comment to the extent we can. So. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a reminder that you have meetings Wednesday afternoon, first meeting at 3 o'clock, joint meeting with the search committee. You review candidate applications with them, and then at 5 o'clock, you'll be by yourself to do that. Next Monday, the committee meeting will have a presentation from the engineer for the Webster Sewer Project. The following Monday, April 1st, you'll have, there's a presentation on affordable housing and also a presentation from the train people. So the CSX rep and the MDOT rep can be at that meeting, so that'll be after the meeting on housing.
Awesome.
So
It's phenomenal.
so
It's phenomenal. Thank you very much. Yeah. Good. Anything else? Nope. So I just had a couple things. Sarah, you're still with us, right?
Yep.
And you're jumping in when you need anything. So we have a couple things, but just quickly, if that's okay, just make it really quick. We don't have to end early today for any reason, do we? Like sundown or anything? So-
I think we should end as close to sundown as possible, but
Okay.
also the meetings are taped and I don't think any of us are
Okay,
specifically observing Ramadan, so
thank you for being a
Yep.
source for. I apologize for
for
not asking.
information.
I apologize for not asking earlier.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Let's try to end as soon as we can.
Quick, all right. So just quickly, we have standing committee assignments and we have to, sorry, that's fast. We're supposed to approve them in a council meeting. I think I need one back for Leo. And Sarah, I'm sorry, I should have emailed you this. I've got enough. Cornell has one. So we're supposed to, committee assignments are supposed to be voted on in the charter, in the ordinance. It says we're supposed to, put together an order and vote on it. We have a finance administration, a community development and operations committee, are our standing committees in the ordinance. It's been our practice to have finance administration and operations together. And I would think that's permissible as long as we acknowledge it in the order. But looking for, I think last year, Chair Wingard assigned people to the committees. And that's not, that was in the manual, but that's not technically how the ordinance writes it up. And I think that ordinance has to trump manuals in terms of what, how we operate. And happy to discuss if people don't agree, but, so we have to staff, and my suggestion is to staff the finance administration / operations committee and the community development committee. We talked a little bit about special committees moving forward, and we can use those as we need to. Cornell, as part of our March 25th meeting. So anyway, if you give me your suggestions, we can put them into the order for the April 8th meeting. So we still have a little bit of time, but please be thinking about what committees you want to serve on. And it seems like it's silly to even have committee assignments. It's our practice this year has been, we all show up for all the committee meetings anyway. But I think we should probably discuss whether that wasn't always the case. And I think maybe we got to think about if it makes sense for us not to always have to, all of us to always have to be here for every committee meeting, except for you, Belinda, you have to be here for everyone. So, and I wanted to talk, Rob and I connected by text about the comprehensive planning committee. I understand that the March 25th was the time we were going to try to formalize have a special town committee meeting with a comprehensive planning committee. And Rob, I know you were the chair. And the assumption and the hope is that you continue to do that in this council. but wanted to see how you're doing with that and what we can do to help.
Yeah, so thanks. I know we talked about having this discussion. So I have been professionally probably the busiest I have ever been the last month. So I'm a little behind on this. I am grateful to everybody for their suggestions, and I have been compiling these things, and I haven't reached out to gauge interest. I haven't reached out to Mitch to see sort of what the best way to move forward with this is, but I do have a decent list, especially I'm grateful to Sarah for sort of going through all of our various buckets of needs for people to serve from various sectors of the town and sort of listing our suggestions in that way. Although really grateful to everybody for their other formatting too, but that helped me. So we are a little behind / I'm a little behind on this. I'm willing to continue working on this, but I guess I am not sure what needs I have from the rest of you yet, other than perhaps a few more people to give me some suggestions. Specifically, I think need some from Leo,
Doing that right
Sonia,
now.
Jacob
Yes.
and Matt. If you have suggestions for people that you think would be good in these various sectors of town where, and I can send out well, maybe I think I can send out an email to you all, saying sort of where we're especially low in potential people, but
We had a very helpful background at was it our February 26th meeting from Isabella about what that components of that look like. So Jacob, if you go back to that meeting, you'll be able to find it.
yeah, and I'll also make that clear in my email to you all. But just wanted to give you all an update that plus we are behind on this, but I don't think it's the end of the world. But I do want to get this started because this is very important.
Dan, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So my memory of our last discussion as a council is that we had agreed that counselors would send ideas to Rob, that Rob would also talk with staff about folks they thought would be good to serve in each of those categories. I would think also perhaps with a planning board who has done this in the past. I think we said Phil and staff. And my understanding at that point is that we were going to bring all those lists together into an executive session of council to talk about who we would like to approach to fill these roles. So my question is, if we're looking to take an actual vote in public on April 8th, we need an executive session on April 1st, which means that we really need those, I mean, at the latest, if not by March 25th, to talk about the names that have been put forth and how we want to approach people, whether it's a set list or some people won't even have been asked if they want to serve. So my understanding is we were going to have an executive session to prioritize. This is the first list of people we would approach. And if they said no, here's the next list of who would be approached in each category. So do we have that executive session on the books yet? And if not, can we get that scheduled?
We have, I'm sorry, we have it's a special town council meeting on the 25th. And I understand that's where we'd have that, you know, who do we want to prioritize in terms of our ask? We don't have one on the April 1st. So as of yet, that we've got the train stuff and the affordable housing stuff. So we could do it then.
I know it would pack things pretty tight, but does that feel possible, doable for us to have?
You want a special meeting on the 25th, and a special meeting on the 1st, and a regular meeting on the 8th. I have it right.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
It
Seems
seems
like-
like we
yes.
might be able to do it in the 25th though, Rob, if you had the time to speak to staff and to fill this week. Is it not possible for us to have that executive session on the 25th?
Yeah, I think so. And I certainly have time this week for this in a way that I haven't in the last several weeks since we last discussed this.
I think it'd be great to see if we could finish it on the 25th, because then there is the stage at that point of reaching out to people to see if they're interested in serving. Cornell, on the 8th, we would need an actual official list of this is the committee, not these are the people we'd like to approach, correct?
That would be the best. Yes.
So
We
yeah, I
all-
think it's why.
That they're on the list.
Yeah.
I think it's wise to put both executive sessions in place in case we need them, but you know, let's make sure on the 25th that we do our job as a council and come up with, you know, first person in each category, second person in each category, so that as we start calling people, we can get a list in place for sure by
Yeah.
that date. Thank you.
That's great.
And just to clarify for Jacob, these are not additional meetings. We're just designating them as special meetings. So,
Okay,
so we can
alright.
have executive session.
So we can, yeah, and vote on stuff.
Appreciate that clarification.
Saw the panic look in your eyes.
So that would,
Meeting every 3 days just seems a little,
You're gonna be here anyway. Just call them special.
so, thank you to Sarah for raising that, and laying out sort of the timeline that we need to be working within. I think that's really helpful for structuring this. I will reach out to you all individually, to make sure that we get this information, because I know people can forget. I know that that can happen. So just to make sure over the course of this week, my plan is to get suggestions from all of you, compile these things, consult with staff to make sure that, all of our ducks in a row, and we will plan to discuss this next Monday on the 25th in an executive session.
Thank you. And thank you for
Dan,
that.
I have one other question because I can't see the document in front of everyone.
Sure.
It's okay, but like, we are looking at all of the committee appointments, correct? Not just the ones required by ordinance. I mean, we have finance and operating together, and that's an ordinance requirement, or maybe a charter, actually a charter requirement, I think. And also, the other one that's charter required, there's one more. Is it the Comprehensive Planning Committee? There's a second one that's charter required. But we have quite a lot of other ones. Are they all on the list, like OEDC and the Historical Society and Environmental Committee and DEIB? They're all there?
Your DEIB committee, so I printed off and it's, I know we've talked about, you and I have talked about like setting up a nominations committee to kind of get our arms around, who these where their vacancies are, when people are appointed, and to get on a cadence of how we invite people to be considered for these opportunities in town. So that was kind of, on the list here that I have, and apologies for not emailing to, under council work plan items, I have that. So I think we need to have a nomination committee. We need to discuss what we want to do in that space. And it's 4 pages, and it's as of December 28th, 23, all the appointments on the different committees. And, many of those require or something that council has a role in. So we'll get our arms
Thank you.
around that. Yep. And the other thing I wanted to share is the unfinished update of the Orono Town Council Policies and Procedures Manual. Sarah did a tremendous amount of work on that last year, and it never got over the finish line. And one of the additions that she has in there is about having a new council orientation. And as Jacob has been doing his due diligence to get up to speed on stuff, I feel bad that we don't have like a program where you just, here's your, 90-minute, seminar on how to be a town councilor. And I know there are development opportunities that the town can provide us with through Maine Municipal, but so I think that's something we should work on and complete, particularly around the things that are not aligned with the code. Sarah did a painstaking job of finding, going through all the different references, and well, this one doesn't really line up with the code, and sort of need to be updated. So that's what I have. Sarah, do you have anything else in that space? Coming home soon? You're gonna be here for,
Coming
What is-
home tomorrow. I'll be there on Wednesday.
oh, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Does anybody have anything else?
Application for community building, any grant?
Oh, shoot, yep. We had a couple of them, right? So we had one that just came in.
Yeah, which we probably don't want. I don't.
Yeah, which sounds exciting. I read it. It was very interesting. But is it Eric? Eric, application for a community building mini grant. Does anyone have any particular insight into it? I called it up on my laptop as we've been talking, but
I don't have any insight, but I think it's a great idea.
Looked worthy to me.
it did look worthy.
It looked like a great project, and I'm very partial to school gardens. I did have a question about if the garden space itself is kind of enclosed within the school, whether this was a project that sort of really stood to benefit the community at large versus more a subset of the community, which was my only reservation. And I feel a little weird being the person being like, I have a reservation about the school garden project, because this is totally my jam.
Yeah.
But real question,
Yeah.
just in the interest of fairness.
Yeah, that's a fair question, I think.
I had the same question, Sonia. I think it's a great idea to have a school garden, but it is in an enclosed space, 100% enclosed by the school building. So unlike the field lighting, which is used by lots of community members who are not necessarily in school. This seemed to me like it might be 100% serving students in the school. And I do think we need to ask if that's something we want to fund in this purview, or when it's 100% a school event, if we want to kick that back to the RSU and say, hey, your folks need some more money for their school garden. I think that's perhaps legitimate when it's 100% enclosed within the school, and I haven't heard how it would benefit anyone outside of that community. We have a, you know, a significant RSU budget, so it's just a thought.
That was my only question is, why are we funding this and not the school? But outside of that, it's a great idea.
So someone want to take it back to Sue and ask if that's the case, or is it enough of a concern to not?
I don't think we have to ask. I mean, it isn't, we know it's enclosed and you can't get there from here, so.
Yeah,
Personally, I feel like we've been pretty liberal with this entire program, and so it's not an issue for me, but if it is specific that it has to encompass like everyone in the community, I'm trying to think of the rest of them. They've all, I guess, have been open to entire public.
Yeah.
So if that's something to stick on, then it's fine. At some point, we need to have a conversation. Are we gonna do this every year and continue to do this? I think it's been interesting, and I think there's been some cool things coming out of it, but feel like this was our first year getting our feet under us, and kind of we're pretty liberal with letting sort of everything go. I don't have a hard decision on, I would tend to, I really like the project, so I would go with it, but if that.
I'm with Leo for that sum of money. I'm okay doing it.
anybody have any objections to the point where we don't want to say okay tonight?
I'm not sure for me, but I'm one person. So if everybody else, and I guess Leo, for me, it's not that it has to be open to the whole community, because I do think we funded one that was geezers and sneakers drinking coffee, right? Which said it was for seniors in the community. It isn't that it is for a specific group. It's, for me, it's the fact that, although maybe that would be open to someone younger if they came, I don't remember, but Matt's maybe telling me it's open.
Yep.
My point is more not, I mean, even if it was a specific segment, it's just that this specific segment of the population has an entire town budget already devoted to it through the RSU. So I guess that's what feels a little different to me, that it is a segment that has a whole RSU budget devoted to it already. So that's for me.
Feels like there was a consensus though to do it. And then we can revisit these kinds of things as we look at in the budget season, because I know we're gonna talk about whether we extend this for another year, and to the extent that what do we learn, do we start putting parameters on these things in a way that, yeah, this year was really just getting it rolling and encouraging people to come to us, so. You okay with that, Sarah? I don't wanna, feels like there's some nods here, so I don't wanna.
Seems like majority momentum is move forward with the project, and it's a sort of hilarious historical oddity that Sarah and I are the people who are like.
It is odd. Yeah, majority rule, that's good.
Yeah, all right, good. So do you have what you need for us on that, Cornell? What's that?
That's how you
Let's do it.
just kind of have a consensus.
Yep,
Yeah.
We let them know that it's.
that's great. Well, thank you. I like that those come last, because it's nice to end on a high note. We have a public comment. Pete, is there any, how many people are online with us tonight, Pete? Don't tell me that. Just, are there any hands raised?
More than zero, but there are no hands raised at this time.
Yeah, I left my Zoom app open on my laptop at home, so. Yeah, driving up the numbers, the eyeballs. Belinda, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Being here.
So,
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. And with that,
Thank you for
I
your help.
don't think we have to take a motion to adjourn. Just
If
adjourn.
you're interested in any town committees, we have 4 whole sheets of them. Just saying.